My name is Anna, and this is not a story about a necklace. It is a story about silence and not the peaceful kind people romanticize, but the kind that presses inward, the kind that settles into a child's bones and never fully leaves, the kind that teaches you long before you are ready that love can come with terms and conditions, and that trust can be revoked without evidence, without explanation, without remorse. It is about what happens when a child learns that gratitude is mandatory but being believed is optional, when she understands that safety can be offered, but belonging must be earned, and even then it can be withdrawn. If you had seen my adoptive parents, you would have trusted them to every own did. They were the kind of people society builds comforting stories around, the kind others point to as proof that goodness, success, and morality often walk hand in hand. They were admired, respected, envied quietly. People spoke their names with reassurance, as if knowing them personally made the world feel more predictable. My adoptive father was a tall, imposing man, with silver-streaked black hair, always neatly combed, never a strand out of place. He dressed in tailored suits, even on weekends, fabrics chosen with precision, pressed to perfection, carrying the faint scent of cedar leather and authority. His posture was always straight, his presence filled rooms. Before he spoke, and he rarely spoke, silence was his language, but when he did speak, his words carried weight, not because he raised his voice, but because everyone knew obedience was expected, not requested. Conversations adjusted themselves around him. People laughed a little softer when he was nearby. Children stood a little straighter without knowing why. My adoptive mother was elegance embodied, slender, graceful porcelain skin untouched by stress or time, soft chestnut hair, always styled, always controlled. Even at home, when no one else was watching, her movements were deliberate, practiced as though she had learned early that emotion, when left unchecked, could spill into something unmanageable. Her voice was gentle, warm in tone but distant in reach. She could soothe without embracing, comfort without closeness. Was the kind of woman people admired from afar, mistaking restraint for kindness, composure for compassion. They never noticed how little space there was for messiness in her world, how discomfort once detected was quietly erased rather than understood. And then there was Lucas. Lucas was beautiful in the way privilege often is, effortless, unquestioned, assumed. He had my mother's eyes, warm, expressive, capable of softness when it suited him. He had my father's confident smile, the kind that suggested assurance rather than arrogance. His laughter came easily. So did forgiveness. His hair fell naturally into place, as though gravity itself favored him. His clothes were always expensive, but worn casually, as if wealth were simply another layer of skin he'd been born with. Walked through the house like someone who had never once questioned whether he belonged, because he never had. Toy did not look like them. My hair was darker, my features sharper, my presence Terry learned early that difference, even when unspoken, still makes noise. Was adopted at 5 years old. I remember the office where I first met them. The carpet was soft beneath my shoes, too soft, almost swallowing my feet. The room smelled like polished wood and lemon cleaner. Everything felt oversized, the chairs, the desk, the windows that stretched far above my head, letting in more light than I was used to. I remember thinking I needed to be careful. Careful not to touch anything, careful not to speak too loudly, careful not to make a mistake. Before I even knew the rules, my adoptive mother knelt in front of me, smoothing her skirt before she did, and took my small hands in hers. Her grip was gentle, practiced. You're safe now, she said. At that age, safety felt like love. I didn't know yet that safety and belonging are not the same thing. For the first few years, I believed I had found a home. I believed the dinners meant family, the routines meant care, the quiet meant peace. I believed that being tucked into a clean bed each night meant I was wanted. Learn their rules quickly. Say thank you. Don't interrupt, don't complain, smile when guests are present, be helpful, be grateful. Was praised for being easy, for being mature for my age, for not causing trouble. No one ever asked why I had learned to disappear so well. And Lucas was born, and slowly, so slowly that no one could have pointed to the moment it began. Everything changed. At first it was subtle. The house rearranged itself around him. When Lucas cried, the air shifted, conversations paused, schedules adjusted. Concern filled every corner like warmth when I cried. Doors closed quietly when Lucas failed. It was a phase, a stumble, something to be softened with reassurance. When I failed, it was disappointment, a reflection, a flaw. We remember one afternoon, small, insignificant by adult standards. I was 80, had spilled juice on the carpet, a mistake, an accident. My father's jaw tightened. My mother sighed, not angrily but tiredly, as if I had confirmed something she Already suspected later that same week, Lucas knocked over an entire glass pitcher at dinner. Laughter followed. It happens, my mother said gently. He's just a child. I learned then that some children are allowed to be human, others are expected to be careful. Gratitude was expected from me. Trust was reserved for blood, so I adaptedi became observandi. Learned to read silences the way other children read faces. I learned to understand glances, pauses, tones. I learned to recognize when affection was being offered and when it was being withdrawn without warning. He learned that survival didn't always require strength, sometimes it required invisibility. Intelligence, quiet and noticed, would later become my revenge. The night of my adoptive mother's birthday arrived like a carefully directed film. Seth Mansion glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. White roses lined the marble halls arranged with precision. The air was thick with perfume, champagne, and the laughter of powerful people who believed this family was flawless. Everything was polished, controlled, perfect. My mother wore an ivory gown that hugged her figure as if it had been designed for this single night. She moved through the room like a vision, gracious, radiant. Around her neck was the necklace. Each necklace was legendary, a cascade of flawless diamonds, cold and brilliant, worth over $1 million. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a symbol of heritage, of pride, of trust. My father had retrieved it from a private international vault just for this night. When my mother stepped into the room, conversation stopped. Had people stared. Then Apla Dady stood near the back watching, and I remember thinking how strange it was that an object could be cherished more deeply than a person who had spent her entire life trying to balance. Lucas moved easily among the guests, laughing, charming, touching shoulders, receiving approval effortlessly. But I noticed things others did. His fingers fidgeted constantly. His smile came half a second too late. His eyes kept drifting toward the staircase, and when my mother excused herself to rest before the final toast, Lucas disappeared. Moments later, noticed Sadie always noticed, said the scream came just after midnight, sharp, terrified. It sliced through the music, through the laughter, through the illusion. Me mother stood frozen in her private suite, staring at the open velvet box on her dressing table. Necklace was gone in seconds. The mansion transformed from a palace into a prison. Security sealed the doors. Guests whispered. Panic spread like smoke, seeping into every corner. And then, without hesitation, suspicion found me. You were upstairs earlier, my father said, calm, cold. You've always been independent, my mother added, as if independence itself were a warning sign. Somion whispered the word I had learned to fear. Adopted. Lucas stood beside my mother, pale, trembling. She wrapped an arm around him instinctively. Unasked where he had been at once. That was the moment something inside me Changetti denied the accusation. Kalmlithi didn't listen. That night I lay awake in my room staring into the darkness. He didn't cry, for long tears were a luxury I had outgrown. Instead, I thought, and that was where my revenge began. Me revenge was not ludi, was not cruel, it was precise. Replayed the night in my mind like a chessboard. The necklace disappeared after my mother returned to her suite. The safe wasn't forced. The alarm never sounded. Only someone who knew the code and the timing could have taken it. Me parents or Lucasi knew about Lucas's problems, the gambling debts, the risky investments. The money my parents quietly paid to protect him from consequences had shielded him his entire life. Before dawn, I accessed the security system, a skill I had learned quietly unnoticed. On camera near my mother's suite had been disabled exactly 7 minutes, not panis intention. Next morning I watched Lucas Claselli. His posture was stiff. His eyes avoided mine. His hands trembled slightly. Dirt stained his shoes, unusual for someone obsessed with appearances. Breakfast. I finally spoke. If I stole it, I said evenly, you'll find the necklace in my room, but if you want the truth, search every room. Silence. Lucas dropped his fork. Security searched methodically. Me room, nothing. Me parents' room, nothing. Then Lucas's room. A guard reached into the closet and pulled out a pair of old sneakers, shoved carelessly into the corner. Out of place, shook once. Something hard shifted. The diamonds spilled out onto the floor, wrapped loosely in a silk scarf. For a moment no one breathed. The necklace lay there glittering like a confession. Lucas collapsed. Sobbing, he confessed everything: his debts, his fear, his certainty that no one would ever suspect him. That certainty was my revenge because it exposed everything. But my revenge didn't end there. Truth didn't just destroy Lucas's lease, it shattered my parents' illusion of themselves in front of their guests, in front of their staff, in front of each other. They had doubted the wrong child, and they would live with that knowledge forever. Later that night, when the house was finally silent, my parents came to my room. My father looked older than I had ever seen him. My mother's perfect composure was gone. We were wrong, my father said. We failed you. My mother whispered. Looked at them calmly. You didn't doubt me because of evidence. I said you doubted me because I wasn't your blood. They didn't denieth it was my final victory, not punishment. Weariness left the house days latter, not in anger but in freedom. Weeks passed then months. Thee wrote to me, not excuses, confessions. Thee admitted their bias, their blindness, their fear of confronting their son. When I finally agreed to see them again, they didn't ask for forgiveness. Thee waited. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is choosing not to let pain decide your future. I forgive you, I said, not because you were right, but because I refused to carry this forever. They credened this time. They looked at me not as a risk, not as a guest, but as their daughter. Me revenge was sweet because it required no cruelty. And truth, once revealed, changes everything.